The Sacramento patrolman's voice cut through the afternoon, a stark command echoing in my own driveway. Sir, you're going to have to leave this place immediately. Sharon watched from the porch, a stranger's grim satisfaction hardening her face, as my world fractured. Do you understand what I said? The officer pressed, his words a final cold push. The wheels of the Southwest Airlines jet touched down with a familiar bump at Sacramento International. Right on schedule. I checked my watch, 3:15. Another trip done, another batch of regional accounts squared away. I always liked the feeling of the plane coming to rest, the quick transition from hundreds of miles an hour to standing still. I pulled out my phone as soon as the cabin lights brightened. Hey, honey, just landed, I said into the receiver. Sharon's voice, a little faint, came through. Good. Glad you're back safe. Be home in about 40 minutes, traffic permitting. I heard some background noise. A television, maybe. Okay, she replied. Yeah, I love you too, bye. The usual exchange. I clicked off the phone, already picturing her on the couch, maybe watching one of her home improvement shows. I spent the drive humming the main riff from a classic rock tune, something from the Eagles. It was a good day, a decent week. My thoughts drifted to Sharon, to the conversations we'd been having lately about starting a family. The nursery plans, the names we liked, the quiet domestic future we were building. It felt solid, real. The familiar turn onto Elm Street came quickly. My street, our house. The porch light was off, which was typical for the afternoon. I pressed the button on the garage door opener as I pulled into the driveway. Nothing. I tried again, pressing harder, leaning out the window slightly. The motor stayed silent. A small annoyance. Maybe the battery was dead, or the power was out in just that one circuit. I parked the car in the driveway and walked to the front door, pulling my keys from my pocket. My house key, the one I'd carried for 7 years, slid into the lock. I turned it, felt the usual give, but the mechanism didn't disengage. I tried again, pushing the key in deeper, wiggling it slightly. It wouldn't turn all the way. A flicker of confusion started to replace the minor irritation. This wasn't right. I rang the doorbell. No sound, not even the faint electronic hum I usually heard. I pressed it again, holding it down for a few seconds. Still nothing. My brow furrowed. Had the power gone out? But the neighbor's lights were on. Hi, honey, it's me, I called out, my voice echoing a little in the quiet afternoon. Something's wrong with the lock. I waited, listening. After a moment, I heard movement inside, a muffled sound, then footsteps approaching the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding, though I hadn't heard the key turn. The door opened a crack, then wider, revealing Sharon. Her face was pale, her expression flat, devoid of the usual greeting. The reason your key doesn't work, she said, her voice completely cold, is because I changed all the locks. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I stared at her, trying to process them. My brain felt slow, thick. I don't understand, Sharon. Let me in. My world, which a moment ago had felt so certain, began to tilt, losing its axis. No, Dale, she replied, her gaze unwavering. You can't come in. You don't live here anymore. Before I could form another question, another protest, a man in a rumpled baseball cap emerged from behind Sharon. He walked briskly towards me, a thick manila envelope held out in front of him like an offering. He didn't make eye contact. He just shoved the envelope into my hand. Wesley Hardaway, he stated, his voice flat, you have been served. I fumbled with the heavy packet, my fingers suddenly clumsy. Wesley Hardaway, what's this? Divorce? My eyes skimmed the bold type at the top of the first page. My name was there, but the Wesley Hardaway had thrown me. Copy of your wife's petition for divorce, the man clarified, still not looking at me, and a temporary restraining order. He turned and walked back towards Sharon, who was now standing fully in the doorway, her arms crossed. Just then, a black and white Sacramento patrol car pulled up to the curb. The officer, a young man with a serious face, got out. He approached me, his hand resting on his belt. Sir, he said, his voice calm but firm, you're going to have to leave this place immediately. This is the residence of Sharon Jensen, and you've been served a restraining order. I stood there, the papers in my hand feeling like lead. My own house, my own driveway. The cop was looking at me, waiting. I glanced at Sharon, who hadn't moved. Her face was like stone. "Sir, do you understand what I said?" the officer asked again, his tone tightening slightly. I nodded, though I didn't. I truly didn't understand any of it. I backed away slowly, got into my car, and drove down Elm Street, away from the house, away from Sharon, the officer's words echoing in my ears, making the world feel distant and unreal. The sun, a thin pale light, pushed through the cheap motel curtains. I blinked, the rough fabric of the sheets against my skin. Disoriented, I stared at the stucco ceiling, the faint smell of stale cigarette smoke lingering in the air. For a moment, it felt like a dream, a bad one, the kind that leaves a residue of dread even after you wake. But then the heavy weight of it settled in. The changed locks, Sharon's cold face, the cop, the papers. It wasn't a dream. I sat up, the motel bed creaking. My clothes from yesterday, the ones I'd worn on the plane, were still on. They felt stiff, wrinkled, and smelled vaguely of airport and regret. No going home for a fresh shirt, no clean pair of jeans. This damn restraining order, I muttered to myself. I'll probably have to hire a lawyer just to even buy a clean suit. The absurdity of it was almost comical, if I hadn't felt so profoundly hollow. It was too early. Most law firms wouldn't open for another hour, maybe two. My stomach rumbled, a sharp protest against the emptiness inside. I hadn't eaten dinner. The last thing I remembered eating was a pre-packaged sandwich on the plane. I found a fast food place a few blocks down, one of those chains that serve breakfast all day. The scrambled eggs tasted like rubber. The coffee was weak, but I forced it down. My mind raced, trying to put together a plan, a list of things to do. Lawyer, money, my job. The thought of calling my boss, Helen Miller, sent a fresh wave of dread through me. Helen was a micromanager, sharp and quick to anger when her carefully constructed schedules were disrupted. I tried to rehearse a plausible, yet vague excuse in my head. A sudden family emergency. A plumbing disaster. Anything but the truth. I pulled out my phone. It was 8:15. She'd be at her desk. I took a deep breath and dialed. "Miller," her voice snapped, as if she'd been expecting my call, bracing for bad news. "Helen, it's Dale. Look, I'm not going to be able to come in today." I tried to sound calm, professional. "I've had a personal emergency." "A personal emergency?" Her tone was already skeptical. "What kind of emergency, Dale? We have the quarterly report due tomorrow, and I need you on those numbers. You just got back." I I can't really get into the specifics right now," I said, trying to maintain some dignity. "It's, pretty complicated." A sigh hissed through the phone line. "Complicated. You must have done something, Dale. You don't just get a complicated personal emergency out of thin air." She wasn't letting it go. I knew her well enough to realize she wouldn't. "Helen, look, my wife just served me with divorce papers and a restraining order. I'm locked out of my house, and all my belongings are in there." The words felt heavy, alien coming out of my mouth, a confession. Without a change of clothes, I'd probably stink up the whole apartment building by lunchtime. A brief silence on the other end, then a grudging concession. "All right, fine, take the day, but I expect you in here first thing tomorrow, and for God's sake, shower before you come in. We have clients." "Thank you, Helen, I appreciate it." Her warning, delivered with a mix of disdain and practicality, was better than outright firing. After hanging up, I started calling law firms, one after another, searching online for best family law attorney in Sacramento. Many of the larger firms didn't handle family law. The ones that did, the names that kept popping up in the search results as highly recommended, came with a consistent, chilling reply. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hardaway," a receptionist would say, her voice polite, detached. "Ms. Jensen has already retained us." Or, "We've had prior contact regarding this matter and cannot represent you due to a conflict of interest." The sheer audacity. Sharon had been planning this, meticulously. She'd called every reputable firm, locking them up, making sure I was left with scraps. The quiet panic started to set in, a cold creeping fear. Finally, at a firm called Winston Samuels and Associates, the receptionist didn't give me the brush off. "Let me check," she said. After a moment, she returned. "Mr. Peterson has an opening this afternoon. 3 o'clock." A quiet relief, like a single raindrop in a long drought. But then, a flicker of suspicion. Why wasn't he busier? Was he new? Inexperienced? I pushed the thought away. At this point, any port in a storm. I decided to check my bank accounts. My last paycheck had been deposited into my individual checking account, thank God. But then I looked at the joint money market account, the one we'd been saving for a down payment on a bigger house for a family. $1 left in it. The number stared back at me, stark and mocking. $1. She'd cleaned it out, every last cent. The rage that had been a dull throb since yesterday afternoon flared, hot and sudden. My hands tightened on the phone. That money, our future. She cleaned out the whole account, I said aloud, the words tasting like ashes. This too would go on the list for Greg Peterson. With the appointment set, I drove to Target, the bright fluorescent lights feeling harsh after the motel gloom. I grabbed a plain white shirt, a pair of khaki pants, socks, underwear. The basics. Nothing felt like me. On the way back to the motel, an impulse, foolish and desperate, pulled the steering wheel to the right. I drove past Elm Street, past our house. The porch light was still off. No car in the driveway, no curtains drawn back, just the same quiet, closed-off facade. No signs of life, no signs of Sharon. I drove away again, the second time feeling even heavier, the dejection pressing down on me like a physical weight. Greg Peterson's office was utilitarian, dominated by a large wooden desk piled with stacks of files. He was a man in his late 50s, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't offer platitudes or false sympathy. He was direct, almost gruff, but he listened, really listened. I sat across from him, the motel-bought clothes feeling foreign and uncomfortable. I recounted the last 48 hours, starting with the plane landing, ending with the empty house. I tried to keep my voice even, factual, mirroring his own detached professionalism. Greg took notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen scratching quietly, occasionally nodding without looking up. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, folding his hands over his stomach. "All right, Mr. Hardaway, this is a common tactic. The temporary restraining order effectively keeps you out of the house, preventing you from accessing documents or even your personal belongings. It gives her an immediate advantage. The divorce petition itself is fairly standard. It asks for typical things, division of assets, spousal support, but the key here is intent." He paused, letting his words sink in. This wasn't impulsive, Dale. He used my first name now, a subtle shift. Changing the locks, serving you with papers the moment you arrived, getting the restraining order, and cleaning out the money market account. That all points to premeditation. We discussed the empty joint account. Greg's expression hardened slightly. That's a significant red flag. A clear attempt to control funds and limit your resources. She's been planning this, Mr. Hardaway. Probably funneling money for months, maybe years, setting up her own separate accounts, securing her position. But why? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Why would she do that? We were talking about starting a family. We were happy. The words felt hollow, a lie I'd told myself for too long. I struggled to comprehend Sharon's premeditation, the cold calculation behind it all. Greg just shrugged slightly. People change, Dale, or they don't. Sometimes they just hide who they are for a long time. Right now, why isn't as important as what and how. We need to counter her actions. He pushed a blank legal pad across the desk. Your job now is to gather any financial documents you can access. Old bank statements, credit card statements, tax forms, anything with numbers on it. Especially look for anything unusual. Any large withdrawals, unexplained transfers, or recurring expenses you don't recognize. I left Greg's office, feeling a little less lost, but the reality of the situation settled heavy on me, a tangible weight. The drive back to the motel was a blur of traffic and vague unease. Sharon hadn't just left me. She'd systematically dismantled my life, piece by piece, while I was oblivious. Back in the quiet motel room, I pulled out my phone. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't a lawyer. I called my younger brother Mitch back in Indiana. It was still morning there. "Hey, little brother," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Everything all right?" "Dale, yeah, I'm good. What's up? You sound off." Mitch was always good at reading me. I took a deep breath. "Mitch, I'm getting a divorce. Sharon served me yesterday, locked me out of the house, took all the money from our joint account, got a restraining order." The words tumbled out, raw and painful. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What? Sharon, no way. I mean, you guys always seem so solid." He sounded genuinely shocked. "Are you okay? Do you have somewhere to stay?" "I'm in a motel," I admitted it. "I'm okay, just trying to figure things out." "Well, if you need a place, you know you always have a couch here, or the spare room if you want it. Just say the word." Mitch's offer was immediate, unconditional. It was a comfort. "I might take you up on that eventually," I said. "But right now I need to fight this. And that's going to cost money, lawyer fees, all that." "Don't worry about it," Mitch said firmly. "I can help with some of it. It's not a lot, but it's something. Just tell me where to send it." We talked for a while longer about mundane things until the call brought a quiet sense of grounding. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. I started combing through old emails, searching for anything out of place, any hint of what Greg had suggested. I went through old credit card statements, online bank records from years past. It was tedious work, a grim archaeology of my own forgotten life. Then I saw it. An unusual recurring expense on an old credit card statement from 3 years ago, then another 2 years ago, and one from last year. A high-end hotel in San Francisco. The charges were always for 3 or 4 nights. San Francisco wasn't a typical destination for Sharon's freelance art business, which usually involved local craft fairs or online sales from home. "San Francisco," she said it was for an art retreat once, I murmured to myself, recalling a vague conversation. "Or a creative solitude getaway." At the time, I just nodded, busy with my own work. A seed of doubt, cold and sharp, had been planted. Retreats and getaways curiously rarely cost this much, or required such a consistent pattern. I clipped the relevant lines from the statements, copied the dates and amounts. My stomach tightened into a knot. I emailed the information to Greg Peterson's office, my hand trembling slightly as I hit send. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been living a lie, a carefully constructed facade, oblivious to a hidden life, a whole other story playing out right beside mine. And I was just now starting to read the first few pages. Greg Peterson held the printouts of the credit card statements, tracing the San Francisco hotel charges with his thumb. "These are consistent, Dale," he said, his voice quiet. "Too consistent for a casual retreat. The timing, the location. It looks like a pattern." He tapped the paper. "This doesn't mean anything legally yet, but it's certainly suspicious." He leaned forward. "I think it's time we bring in a private investigator, someone discreet who can look into Sharon's recent activities, see who she's been spending time with, where she's been going." I hesitated. The idea felt invasive, dirty, like peering through a keyhole into a life that was once mine, now twisted. But the gnawing uncertainty, the gaping hole where trust used to be, was worse. "I need to know," I said, the words heavy. "I need to know what's been going on." "Good," Greg said, nodding. "I have a few contacts. Former cops, usually. They know how to find things." In the days that followed, the silence from Sharon was absolute. I tried calling her number. It was disconnected. I tried her sister, her parents. Their voices were terse, vague, full of practiced deflection. "Sharon's busy, Dale. She's moving on. You should too." It was clear they were on her side, a solid, unbreachable front. Even some of my own friends, the ones who had been our friends, started to distance themselves. Calls went unreturned, invitations stopped. The drama, as they saw it, was something best avoided. Greg hired a man named Stan, a former cop with a weathered face and an even more weathered trench coat. Stan was quiet, efficient. He asked a few questions, took down some basic information, and then disappeared into the background noise of Sacramento. A week later, an email arrived from Stan. The subject line was simply, "Report, Jensen. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The report was concise, factual. Sharon had been seen frequently over the past several months with a man, a local business owner named Kevin Cross. Kevin Cross owned a small construction company just a few miles from our old home, out towards the industrial park. The report detailed sightings, coffee shops, restaurants, even the grocery store. My mind raced, memories clicking into place with a sickening precision. Sharon's late nights at the studio when she was supposedly working on a big commission. Her new clients in construction, the ones she said needed custom artwork for their office buildings. She'd always brushed off my questions with a dismissive wave. I'd been so trusting, so oblivious. Kevin Cross, I muttered, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. I knew the name. He was a regular at the local art shows Sharon frequented, always complimenting her work, lingering a little too long at her booth. I'd always thought he was just a genuine admirer of her talent, a fellow local businessman, supportive of the arts. Another lie I'd told myself. Attached to the report were pictures, digital, date-stamped, clear, Sharon and Kevin laughing over coffee, Sharon and Kevin holding hands in a park, Sharon and Kevin walking up the front steps of a house, Kevin's house I now knew, Sharon letting herself in with a key, the proof, undeniable. A wave of nausea hit me, cold and overwhelming. It wasn't just about the money, the house, the calculated financial ruin. It was a deep, personal betrayal, a violation of every trust, every shared intimacy. She hadn't just left me, she'd replaced me. My life had been a stage for her secret play, and I was the unsuspecting audience. I drove straight to Greg's office, the printouts of Stan's report crumpled in my hand. I threw them onto his desk. "She's been with him," I said, my voice tight, strained. "Kevin Cross. For how long, Greg? How long has she been lying to me?" Greg picked up the photos, his face grim as he looked at them. "This confirms her motive, Dale. It's not just about money now, it's about a new relationship, and it gives us leverage." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "California is a no-fault state, but infidelity can sometimes impact spousal support or the division of assets, especially if marital funds were used to support the affair. And given the financial maneuver she made, this strengthens our case significantly." I felt a desperate, primal urge to confront Kevin, to drive to his construction office, to smash something, anything, just to feel some release, to make them both understand the pain they'd inflicted. But Greg's calm voice cut through the red haze. "Don't do anything foolish, Dale. No confrontations, no calls, no texts. Let me handle this legally. That's what you hired me for." My anger, a raw, hot flame, slowly began to solidify into a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I would fight for what was left. With Stan's report in hand, Greg wasted no time. He filed motions with the court, requesting an immediate freeze on Sharon's assets, citing fraudulent transfers and marital misconduct. The legal papers detailed the empty joint account, the suspicious hotel charges, and the photographic evidence of her affair with Kevin Cross. Sharon's lawyer, a woman named Ms. Davies, was as sharp as Greg had warned. Her initial responses were dismissive, denying everything. She painted Dale as unstable, prone to fits of jealousy, fabricating stories to discredit a successful, independent woman. It was a calculated counterattack, attempting to control the narrative. But Stan, the private investigator, kept digging. He turned his focus to Kevin Cross's finances, cross-referencing them with Sharon's so-called art business. He peeled back layers, scrutinizing bank statements, business registrations, and tax records. The new reports started to trickle in. "It's not an art business, Dale," Stan said over the phone, his voice flat, devoid of judgment. "Not really. It looks like your wife's freelance art business has been funneling significant amounts of money into a new LLC formed by Kevin Cross. Shell corporations, false invoices, standard stuff." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's a money laundering operation," Stan replied, "or at the very least, a sophisticated way to hide marital assets from you. It's elaborate." I hung up the phone, floored by the depth of the deception. It wasn't just an affair, it was a criminal enterprise. She planned this all so carefully, I whispered to the empty motel room, the words catching in my throat. The audacity, the cold calculation. I recalled Sharon's quiet push to wait for a family, her vague reasons about wanting to establish her art career first, about being financially secure. At the time, I'd thought it was responsible, mature. Now, the memory tasted bitter. It was likely a stall tactic, buying her time to build her secret empire with Kevin, to strip me of everything. Then another memory surfaced, chilling me to the bone. Kevin Cross. He hadn't just admired her art at shows. He had visited our home several times. For business consultations, Sharon had said, needing to show him large pieces, discuss commissions. I'd been there in the living room working on my laptop while they talked in the studio. I'd offered them coffee. I'd shaken his hand. He was in my house, I whispered, disgusted, the words a rough rasp. Under my roof the whole time. The betrayal wasn't just a distant concept anymore. It was a physical stain, tainting every corner of what I'd believed was my home. Greg, meanwhile, was preparing for the next phase, deposition. I would have to face Sharon and Kevin in person, to sit across from them, to answer questions, to hear their lies. The thought filled me with a mixture of dread and a hard, unyielding resolve. I started keeping a journal, a cheap spiral-bound notebook from the drugstore. I wrote down every detail, every memory, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. It was a desperate attempt to find truth amidst the rubble of my life, to reconstruct a timeline, to find the cracks in the facade I'd lived inside for so long. As I wrote, I began to connect the dots, seeing patterns I had been too blind, too trusting to notice before. Sharon's new expensive phone, her sudden insistence on separate bank accounts for business expenses, the way she'd often answer her phone and speak in hushed tones, claiming it was a sensitive client. All of it, once innocuous, now screamed deception. One night, digging through old files on our shared home computer, something Sharon must have forgotten to wipe, I found it. A hidden email account. It was labeled something generic like Art Studio Admin. But the messages inside weren't about art. They were from Sharon to Kevin, and from Kevin to Sharon. Intimate, loving messages, discussing future plans, detailing their scheme, gloating over their success, and keeping me in the dark. "We'll be free soon, my love," one email read, dated 6 months prior. "Just a few more weeks, and we'll have everything we need to start over, away from him." The words didn't just hurt, they cut deeper than any blow. They confirmed it all. The methodical planning, the cold-blooded execution. They weren't leaving me. They were actively dismembering my life. This new evidence solidified Greg's case. It confirmed Sharon's long-term plan not just to leave, but to take everything, leaving me with nothing. The fight was no longer just about fairness. It was about justice. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Word travels fast in a town like ours, especially when it involves a sudden divorce and an unexpected affair. The whispers started almost immediately. Some friends, the real ones, reached out. Mark from work, who'd known me since high school, invited me for a beer, listened without judgment. Sarah, Sharon's old friend, called just to say she was sorry. Others, however, became experts at avoiding eye contact, crossing the street, or suddenly remembering an urgent appointment. Judgment hung in the air, a silent condemnation from those who didn't know the full story, or perhaps didn't want to. My mother called, her voice tight with a mixture of heartbreak and fury directed at Sharon. "I always thought she was so sweet, Dale. How could she do this?" My father, ever the stoic, offered quiet strength. "We're here for you, son. Don't forget that." Their support was a lifeline. At work, Helen Miller was less forgiving. She didn't say anything directly, but the passive-aggressive comments were constant. "I hope your personal distractions aren't going to affect the third-quarter projections, Dale." Or, "Some of us have lives that don't involve so much drama." I gritted my teeth and focused on the spreadsheets, refusing to give her any more ammunition. In the evenings, I found solace in running. I'd lace up my worn sneakers and hit the back roads outside of town, the ones that wound through cornfields and past old farmhouses. I'd push myself until my lungs burned and my legs ached, until the physical exhaustion overshadowed the emotional pain, if only for a few hours. The rhythm of my footsteps on the asphalt was the only consistent thing in my life. One afternoon I saw them, Sharon and Kevin. They were leaving the local coffee shop, laughing, stepping into his pickup truck. Sharon glanced up, her eyes meeting mine across the parking lot for just a split second. Her face was unreadable, a flicker of something, guilt maybe, or defiance before she quickly turned away, pretending not to see me. Kevin, oblivious, put an arm around her as they drove off. It was a public performance, a casual display of their new life, flaunted in the very community where Sharon had built her image as the sweet artist, the devoted wife. I realized then how much of her life, perhaps all of it, had been a performance. I started attending a support group for divorced men at the community center. It was awkward at first, a room full of strangers sharing their raw, messy pain. But listening to their stories, seeing the quiet nods of understanding, a fragile sense of camaraderie began to form. We were all shipwrecked, all trying to navigate the choppy waters of betrayal and loss. It was there in those quiet, shared moments that I finally began to grieve. Not just for Sharon, but for the life I thought I had, the future I had envisioned. The house, the family, the quiet evenings, the shared dreams. It felt like a death, the end of a world I had believed in, a profound and personal apocalypse. Meanwhile, Greg's team was uncovering more. Stan's reports started piling up, detailing more shell corporations, more hidden bank accounts, all linked to Sharon and Kevin. The financial scheme was far more elaborate than we had initially anticipated, involving property transfers, complex business deals, even investments in other states. She wasn't just leaving you, Dale, Greg said, spreading a stack of documents across his desk. She was building an empire behind your back, leveraging your marital assets, your shared credit to finance her new life with him. This goes beyond simple infidelity. This is grand larceny. The word empire echoed in my head. I felt a profound sense of humiliation. I had been so utterly, completely duped. But beneath the shame, a burning desire for justice ignited, stronger than ever. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about principle. It was about righting a colossal wrong. I needed money, funds for legal fees, for a new place. Back at the motel, I looked at the few boxes of belongings I'd managed to salvage from my storage unit. Mostly old collectibles, baseball cards, comic books from my childhood. Things Sharon had called junk. I found a local dealer, got a decent offer for some of the more valuable items. It was a small measure of control, a tiny victory in a war where I felt utterly powerless. Selling them felt like shedding old skin, making space for whatever new, unfamiliar life awaited me. The courtroom felt sterile, cold. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glare on everything. Sharon sat at the defense table next to Ms. Davies, looking composed, almost defiant in a tailored blue suit. Kevin Cross was there too, sitting just behind them, his face unsmiling. They looked like a united front, ready for battle. Ms. Davies began, her voice smooth and confident, attempting to portray me as an abusive, controlling husband, the restraining order and necessary protection for Sharon. She spoke of my erratic behavior, my unreasonable demands, painting a picture of a man driven by jealousy and a desire to dominate. It was a calculated attack designed to make me seem unstable, to discredit anything I might say. Then it was Greg's turn. He stood, calm and methodical. He presented the evidence. The hotel receipts, meticulously dated and matched to the dates Sharon claimed to be working late or on solo art retreats. The email exchanges printed out and highlighted, particularly the one that read, "We'll be free soon, my love." And finally, the photo Stan had taken, showing Sharon and Kevin holding hands, entering Kevin's house. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and an impassive face, listened intently, occasionally making a note on her pad. She didn't react, didn't give anything away. When the email excerpts were read aloud, particularly the ones where Sharon expressed her disdain for me, her plans for a new life, I saw a flicker across Sharon's face, a tightening of her jaw, a slight paling of her skin. The private thoughts, exposed under the cold glare of the courtroom, seemed to wound her manufactured composure. Kevin Cross was then called to the stand. He swore an oath, then sat, looking directly at Ms. Davies as she led him through a carefully crafted narrative. He denied any romantic relationship with Sharon, calling her a valued business partner and dismissing the photos as innocent interactions between colleagues. Just friendly, he insisted, his voice smooth, practiced. But Greg was ready. His cross-examination was surgical. He dismantled Kevin's testimony piece by piece, using bank records to show large, unexplained transfers between Sharon's art business and Kevin's LLC. He presented evidence of their shared expenses, their joint travel bookings, things that went far beyond a mere business partnership. He highlighted how Kevin had financially benefited from the fraudulent transfers of marital funds. I watched, a hollow ache in my chest as my former wife sat beside her lover, the architect of my financial and emotional ruin. There was no apology in her eyes, no regret, just a cold, hard resolve, matching Kevin's. They were in it together. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, the judge finally delivered her ruling. She ruled against Sharon's request for spousal support, citing the clear evidence of marital misconduct and financial impropriety. More significantly, she granted an injunction, freezing Sharon's new business assets and ordering a full forensic accounting. The court recognized the elaborate scheme, the deception. It was a victory, a small one perhaps, but a significant legal win. Yet, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. The emotional cost was immense, heavier than any physical burden. The relief was fleeting, quickly replaced by a profound weariness. "This is just the beginning, Dale," Greg warned me as we left the courtroom, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. "She'll appeal. They'll fight. They have too much to lose now." I nodded, the weight of the legal battle ahead settling on me. It would be long, arduous, a protracted war of attrition. I glanced back at Sharon, who was now speaking quietly with Kev Finn, their heads close together. She was a stranger now, a puzzle I no longer cared to solve. I wondered if I had ever truly known her at all. The woman I married, the woman I planned a future with, had never really existed. Months crawled by, blurring into a monotonous cycle of legal filings, endless depositions, and escalating calm. The motel room had become a permanent, unwelcome residence. Each bill from Greg's office was a fresh stab, a reminder of the price of betrayal. The legal revelations had a ripple effect beyond the courtroom. Kevin Cross, Sharon's affair partner, found himself under increasing scrutiny. His business partners, seeing their company linked to a fraud investigation, began to distance themselves. Rumors circulated about internal audits, about his reputation crumbling in the local construction market. Sharon's art business, the elaborate front for their financial schemes, started to unravel under the relentless legal pressure and public exposure. Clients vanished. Her suppliers became wary. The carefully constructed facade crumbled, exposing the hollow shell beneath. Then came another discovery, one that cut deeper than any financial loss. During the forensic accounting, Greg's team found evidence that Sharon had been quietly selling some of my personal family heirlooms. Small, sentimental items, my grandfather's watch, a locket that belonged to my grandmother, a set of engraved silver pens I'd inherited. Items she had always dismissed as clutter. She had sold them to fund her new life, to add to the hidden cash reserves, discarding them as casually as she had discarded me. The betrayal felt intensely personal, a violation of my past, my roots. The judge, seeing the clear pattern of deception and fraudulent transfers, ordered a detailed forensic accounting of all assets, both declared and suspected. It was a painstaking process, but it laid bare the full extent of Sharon's financial deception. Offshore accounts, hidden property in Kevin's name that had been purchased with marital funds, elaborate transfers to shell corporations. It was a labyrinth of deceit. Finally, the court ruled decisively in Dale's favor. The judge meticulously dissolved many of Sharon's fraudulent asset transfers, ordering the return of substantial funds. Sharon was ordered to pay Dale a significant sum, representing his rightful share of the hidden assets, along with punitive damages for her egregious misconduct. It was a crushing blow for her, a public acknowledgement of her schemes. Kevin Cross, too, faced his reckoning. His business partners initiated their own civil suit against him for corporate malfeasance and the misuse of company resources. His construction business teetered on the brink, his reputation in tatters. Under the immense pressure and financial fallout, Sharon and Kevin's relationship, once flaunted so openly, grew strained. The empire they had built together was collapsing around them, and the cracks in their united front became glaringly obvious. The whispers in town were no longer just about my divorce. They were about their downfall. I felt a bittersweet sense of justice. I had won. The court had affirmed my claims, returned what was rightfully mine. But at what cost? The years of my life, the emotional scars, the shattered trust, those couldn't be quantified or reclaimed. The victory felt hollow, tinged with an abiding sadness. The house, the one I had shared with Sharon, the one she had locked me out of, was finally mine again, at least on paper. But the memories were too painful to keep. Every room felt tainted, every corner held a phantom echo of a life that was a lie. I put it on the market, wanting nothing more than to sever that last, wrenching connection to a past life. The for sale sign felt like a tombstone. With the legal battle finally winding down and a significant portion of my financial stability restored, I considered my next steps. Moving back to Indiana, to be closer to Mitch, felt increasingly appealing. A chance to start truly fresh, away from the ghosts of Sacramento. The financial recovery was significant, a solid foundation for a new beginning, but it couldn't erase the deep, burning scar of the betrayal. That would remain, a permanent part of my story. The move to Indiana felt less like an escape and more like a quiet migration. I found a small town, far enough from the bustling state capital to feel removed, but close enough to Mitch to make regular visits easy. I rented a modest, single-story house with a patch of overgrown lawn. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and the air was free of the echoes of Sacramento. I started a new job, a similar role in finance, but with a different company, a different set of faces. The quiet rhythms of the Midwest slowly began to work their healing magic. The vast open fields, the slower pace of life, the unassuming kindness of strangers. It was a balm to the raw wounds I carried. Healing wasn't instantaneous. I sought out a therapist, a kind woman who listened patiently as I recounted the unraveling of my life. It was a slow, deliberate process, working through the trauma, the betrayal, learning to trust again, first in myself, then in the world around me. It felt like rebuilding a shattered foundation, brick by painstaking brick. I connected with Mitch more often. Our weekly calls turned into weekend visits, then easy dinners. We talked about everything and nothing, sharing the quiet comfort of family, a bedrock of loyalty I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. News filtered back, as it always does, even across state lines. Sharon's relationship with Kevin Cross was over, tainted by the legal battles and financial ruin they had both brought upon themselves. Kevin's business had collapsed entirely, his reputation destroyed. Sharon, stripped of her ill-gotten gains and facing a mountain of debt, struggled to rebuild her life. The empire she had built had indeed crumbled, leaving her with only the wreckage of her own making. Occasionally, I reflected on Sharon, not with the burning anger that had consumed me for so long, but with a profound sadness, not for what she had done to me, but for the woman she had become, for the person I thought I knew, who had never truly existed. The betrayal was still a part of me, a scar, but the sharp edges had dulled, replaced by a quiet melancholy. I learned to appreciate the simple things again, a quiet evening on my porch watching the fireflies dance, the genuine smile of a neighbor, the warmth of true friendship, forged not in shared history, but in present kindness. The pursuit of wealth, the grand plans for a bigger house, a perfect family. All those aspirations had been tainted by deception. Now simplicity felt like its own reward. I even began to date tentatively. It was awkward at first, a cautious re-entry into a world I'd thought I'd lost forever. But I found that vulnerability, the willingness to share my story, was a strength, not a weakness. It allowed for deeper connections, for genuine understanding. In my new yard, I planted a small garden, tomatoes, basil, a few wildflowers. Nurturing something new from the ground up, watching it grow felt symbolic. It was a tangible act of creation, of hope, a counterpoint to the destruction I had witnessed. The scars remained, a permanent reminder of the past, but they no longer defined me. They were part of my story, not the whole story. I understood the devastating price of betrayal, in the deeper, quieter value of integrity, of honesty, of simply living a good, decent life. I picked up my journal, the one I'd started in the motel room. I opened it to the last blank page and wrote a final entry. The hardest part wasn't losing what I had, but finding out who I lost it to. I closed the journal, placing it on my nightstand. A chapter closed. I walked to the window, looking out at the quiet, enduring Midwestern landscape, the endless horizon promising not a perfect future, but a real one. I was ready for whatever came next.